Biden's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamation. I'm pleased to welcome our witnesses today, who I'll introduce shortly, to the subcommittee. And I'm glad to be chairing a subcommittee that deals with so many issues that are incredibly important to folks back home in Washington State and all across the country. How we manage our resources has tremendous implications for our economic strength and our national security. Likewise, how we manage our water resources directly affects families and farmers, our food supply, and even our fish. And how well we manage our nation's ports and harbors has major implications for our economy as well as local ecosystems. So I look forward to working with Ranking Member Kennedy and all of our colleagues to make sure these issues get the attention and funding they deserve. And today's hearing is an important part of that process. Now, I've said from the start, I don't think we can make the investments our nation truly needs under the constraints of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. I have listened as colleagues on the other side of the aisle have made the case for more defense funding. I want to be clear, as we discuss additional resources to meet our country's needs, I will be insisting on parity between our new resources for defense and non-defense, because bottom line, our country's strength, its competitiveness, and its future all depend on so many of the essential investments we make on the non-defense side of the ledger. Today's hearing offers a stark reminder of how important so many of those non-defense investments are. That's because water resources managed by the Bureau and the Corps alike irrigate crops, allow those crops and other goods to be transported to consumers here at home and around the world. They help sustain keystone species like salmon in Washington State, provide water to over 31 million Americans, and even literally keep the lights on with hydroelectric power. So when it comes to our nation's competitiveness, this is something we cannot take for granted. For the sake of our economy as well as our environment, we need to protect and maintain our waterways for wildlife to thrive and for essential transportation to occur. We have to keep our water running and our ports bustling and our farms irrigated and our fish thriving and our electric grid reliable. These are investments in safety as well. We cannot shortchange safety. We need to make sure communities are safe and prepared for extreme weather events amid the worsening climate crisis with levees and seawalls and nature-based infrastructure to prevent flooding. And let's not forget drought mitigation. We are seeing this issue get worse and worse with historic drought conditions in recent years. This is a challenge that ripples throughout our nation, hurting farmers, threatening families and wildlife with wildfires, and undermining our economy. So when we talk about investments for the year ahead, make no mistake, water is just too important to our families and our economy and our nation to take for granted. I'm glad that despite tough funding caps, we were able to deliver critical resources for both the Bureau and the Corps in the FY24 bill that Congress recently passed, and including an historic funding level for Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to keep our nation's ports and harbors in good condition. Of course, I've been working hard to make sure Washington State ports get their fair share of that HMTF. For too long, that was not the case, and even after I authored and passed legislation to fix that in 2020, I was frustrated to see the Army Corps work plan for FY23 fall short. I raised this several times with Corps leadership, including at our hearing last year, and included language in our FY24 bill on this matter, so I'm pleased that we're finally seeing real progress. The work plan the Army Corps released Monday shows a much-needed course correction. It implements the law as Congress intended it, which makes a meaningful difference for ports like the Port of Seattle and the Port of Tacoma to the tune of $25 and $29 million from the HMTF this year alone. So I appreciate you taking my call as Assistant Secretary and working with me on this. Now, in addition to the Army Corps work plan, I should also mention how President Biden's budget request shows how he understands how important these issues are. I was especially pleased to see this budget include $500 million for the Howard Hansen Dam Fish Passage Project. Saving our salmon is a top priority for me, and because salmon are a way of life in Washington State. This project will open up over 100 miles of prime habitat for salmon and has the potential to produce more salmon than any other project in our region. That's why I've worked so hard in our past bills to secure funding to move that forward, and I want to make sure we deliver this historic funding in this budget request so we can see that project through. And I look forward to hearing more from our witnesses about this work and more shortly. With that, I want to turn it over to my ranking member, Kennedy. It's a delight to be working with you again on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Commissioner and General and Mr. Secretary, welcome. The President has submitted a budget for our Corps of Engineers. It's $7.2 billion. That's a lot of money in anyone's book. That's the good news, I guess. The bad news is that I was looking last night, it's 17% less than the Corps' current budget. That makes no sense to me. The Corps actually saves us money. Your flood control projects mitigate damage that we would otherwise have to pay for, including but not limited to through FEMA. The navigational dredging that you do facilitates commerce, which grows our economy. Workers pay taxes like everybody else. If their wages are higher and there are more workers, they pay more in taxes. So do the businesses. I don't want to belabor this point. I've got a lot of things to talk about today, but that's going to be my starting point. This just makes no sense to me. We need a budget for the Corps of Engineers that looks like somebody designed it on purpose. And this budget doesn't do that. And with that, I look forward to hearing your responses.
Thank you, Ranking Member Kennedy. I will now briefly introduce our panel. We have Michael Connor, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Lieutenant General Scott Spelman, Chief of Engineers for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and Camille Touton, Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. We will now proceed with witness testimony from Assistant Secretary Connor. You have 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you. Chair Murray, Ranking Member Kennedy, distinguished members, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the President's 2025 budget request for Army Civil Works. I've submitted a full statement for the record, which I'll quickly summarize. First, my appreciation and thanks for the strong bipartisan support for the Army Civil Works program as represented in the 2024 appropriations bill. The 2025 budget request includes over $7.2 billion for the Civil Works program, with a focus on investments to facilitate waterborne transportation, reduce coastal and inland flood risks, and restore significant aquatic ecosystems. These investments reinforce President Biden's ongoing commitment to protect, restore, and improve the nation's water resources to strengthen our economy, protect people and property, and improve the environment. Current and future water resources challenges are not like those of the past. Weather extremes are increasingly the norm, creating risk to communities, the economy, and natural systems. As a result, understanding vulnerabilities and increasing preparedness is paramount. This budget will spur innovation by investing in research and development and will help ensure we improve our capabilities to assess risk and aggressively confront these challenges. And our infrastructure investments through this budget will support community resilience to better address these extremes while tackling climate change and promoting equity for underserved and communities and tribal nations. With a focus on modernization and innovation, the budget continues to prioritize the highest performing work within the three main missions of the Civil Works program: commercial navigation, thereby supporting the nation's supply chains; flood and storm damage reduction, protecting communities and building resilience; and aquatic ecosystem restoration, recognizing the important habitat, water quality, flood protection, and water supply functions of the nation's watersheds if healthy. Now, with an enacted 2024 appropriations bill and robust funding, as I earlier mentioned, I want to address the serious needs that was ignored in our 2024 budget and therefore critically important in FY 2025. The 2025 budget includes $6.4 million for the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. Since 2009, my office has not received an appropriation larger than $5 million, and some years less. However, our costs, salary, services, rent, travel, supplies, have all continued to rise over the past 15 years. Using the latest CPI, the $5 million my office received in 2009 equates to over $7.2 million in today's dollars. Nonetheless, funding remains flat even as our responsibilities grow. Full funding is critical for effective oversight of the Army Civil Works program and to help us support timely and complete responses to your requests. It is also critical to address the many new responsibilities added to the Civil Works portfolio through numerous statutory provisions enacted in the past 5 Water Resources Development Acts. I can assure you this is not empire building, merely paying for the positions already in place to conduct our business. With my remaining time, I'd like to highlight the Corps of Engineers' responsibilities in disaster and emergency response, a mission area with high visibility given recent events. 2 months ago, I met with the Incident Command team in Maui, responding to 2023's devastating wildfires. And several weeks ago, I visited the Incident Command Center in Baltimore Harbor, working the recovery and response efforts to the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse disaster. In both situations, the Corps is just one of several agencies charged with critical responsibilities. In Maui, we've operated within the FEMA disaster response framework using FEMA's resources to carry out our assigned missions. Our responsibilities, whether emergency power, debris removal, and/or building critical infrastructure, require us to be prepared to maintain the skills and have contracts in place that are necessary to carry out the mission. With this preparation, the Corps is removing debris and setting the stage for rebuilding on over 1,600 properties in Maui that were devastated by wildfire. It also constructed a temporary, but I can assure you, a very impressive elementary school in 95 days for turnover to the local school district. In Baltimore, we are not working within a FEMA framework, but using our own resources to quickly deploy and continue incurring the Federal Navigation Channel serving the Port of Baltimore to restore full operations, even while supporting the now completed recovery efforts associated with the loss of life caused by the disaster. One of our smaller accounts, the National Emergency Preparedness Program, was key to developing the existing contractual arrangement with Navy Supervisory Salvage that enabled the Corps to immediately, post-disaster, begin planning the actions necessary to clear the navigation channel. Thankfully, we received full year 2024 funding in early March, just weeks before the disaster, providing Baltimore Harbor O&M funds, which have provided the resources to date to carry out channel clearing operations. Once that mission is complete, those funds, along with any others used, will need to be restored to carry out other critical operations. The Corps of Engineers is at its best when called upon to work with others within the nation's emergency and disaster response frameworks. The resources that you, as appropriators, provide us on a timely basis are key to our and thus the nation's success in responding in times of crisis, as well as preparing for future challenges. Thank you for the time. I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much. Lieutenant General Spelman.
Good morning, Chair Murray, Ranking Member Kennedy, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to testify before you today, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss the President's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works Program. But before I begin my prepared remarks, I sincerely want to thank members of the committee for your ongoing support, as Mr. Connor mentioned, related to our Francis Scott Key Bridge response in Baltimore. Foremost, our thoughts remain with those who were impacted by the collapse of the bridge, and our condolences go out to the families who lost loved ones. We, along with our many partners, continue to work around the clock to remove wreckage in an expeditious and safe manner to ultimately restore navigation to the Port of Baltimore, and we remain on track to meet our commitment of restoring the full navigation channel by the end of this month. But today I look forward to discussing the status of important core projects and programs, as well as answer any questions the committee may have regarding our fiscal year 2025 budget request. I will start by saying that we greatly appreciate Congress's continued support of the Corps Civil Works program. Recent appropriations have enabled significant, and I would say historic, investments in water resource projects around our country. And they've allowed us to further develop innovative approaches to address our most pressing challenges through focused research and development. The fiscal year 2025 budget reflects a targeted approach to continue investment in our water resource infrastructure, while also incorporating climate resilience into our commercial navigation, flood and storm damage reduction, and aquatic ecosystem restoration missions. The budget also supports Assistant Secretary Connor's priorities for the Corps by strengthening our supply chains, increasing ecosystem resilience, promoting environmental justice in underserved communities and tribal nations, investing in R&D, and finally, sustaining and improving our relationships with our many partners. Our budget reflects an emphasis on work that provides the highest economic, environmental, and public safety returns to the nation. and we continue to strive for bold, innovative actions to improve our performance and help us achieve our vision of engineering solutions for our nation's toughest challenges. Our teams remain hard at work, seeking out new and better ways to mitigate or eliminate project risks so we can further strengthen the safety and security of communities across our country and its territories. And this morning, I want to once more highlight the importance of research and development in this effort. Whether it's flood risk management, drought, water supply, navigation, or ecosystem restoration, R&D is a critical effort in all that we do. Many members of this committee are from coastal states where most of our nation's largest cities are located, and I'll just use that as my brief example. Over the years, without investment in basic coastal engineering research, this type of land use today, having large cities on our coastlines, it would not be possible, nor would the existence of our nation's precious beaches and our coastal protections. The lessons that we learn in our core laboratories and university laboratories where we partner are critical to getting the job done right out in the field. And this investment in basic research is even more important today as we look at the impacts of sea level rise and changing precipitation patterns that are very real and our communities are already experiencing. So I thank both Secretary Connor for his leadership, the administration and Congress for recognizing this challenge and significantly increasing our R&D investment as we move ahead. We have to build upon this momentum. I will conclude by saying the Corps does not accomplish anything on its own. Delivering successful civil works project is a shared responsibility. It's a team sport. We draw from our 249 years of engineering expertise and build upon our relationships with our non-federal partners, project stakeholders, and certainly Congress to enable us to succeed. I look forward to continuing to work with this committee, with Congress and administration to address the nation's critical water resource infrastructure needs. And thank you again, Chair Murray, Ranking Member Kennedy, and members of the committee. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Finally, Commissioner Tootin.
Good morning. My name is Camille Clementine, the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. Thank you, Chair Murray, Ranking Member Kennedy, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to discuss the President's budget request for the Bureau of Reclamation. We are grateful for your bipartisan support and for our working relationship with the subcommittee. The Bureau of Reclamation is the largest deliverer and manager of water in the nation and is second largest producer of hydropower. We have 189 projects across the American West and help to feed the nation and the world through 10 million acres of irrigated agriculture, provide water to millions of Americans, and meet our trust responsibility to sovereign nations while sustaining ecosystems across the Western landscape. The need to secure, maintain, and modernize our nation's infrastructure is an administration priority, and we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to utilize our fiscal year 2025 $1.6 billion budget request with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. The cyclical nature of Western hydrology, as we've seen from the last 3 years, highlights the need for immediate actions as well as thoughtful planning and on-the-ground work to make both our infrastructure and operational decisions more resilient to withstand future water resource scarcity and variability. Our 25 budget priorities reflect a commitment to drought planning and response activities to promote water security. This approach is illustrated by the signing of a record of decision last week to protect the near-term stability and sustainability of the Colorado River system. With historic conservation of 3 million acre-feet in collaboration with our partners, made possible by the President's Investing in America agenda, we staved off the immediate threat and stabilized the system to protect water deliveries in the ecosystem and power production. Our focus is now on the future. For the entire West, we are guided by the best available science and engineering to make informed decisions together. The stability of our infrastructure and our commitment to transparency remains our highest priority. Reclamation's dams and reservoirs, water conveyance systems, and hydropower facilities serve as the water and power infrastructure backbone of the American West. As with all infrastructure, these features are aging and in need of critical maintenance to prepare for the future. Our FY25 budget includes $74.8 million for extraordinary maintenance, with an announcement for our FY25 funding, FY24 bipartisan infrastructure law funding imminently. This includes $2.5 million for the Milk River project in Montana and over $2 million for the installation of a surge tank at the Mill Creek plant in Oregon that's part of the Dalles project. For New Mexico, our request also includes over $6 million for irrigation infrastructure and rehabilitation for the Rio Grande Pueblos. Reclamation's Water Smart program also provided nearly $10 million in bill funding to the North Unit Irrigation District for fish screen replacement at Bend Headworks on the main stem of the Deschutes River. We must also address our infrastructure needs while considering the needs of rural and underserved communities. Reclamation is establishing and rebuilding water infrastructure for underserved populations by ensuring that clean drinking water is provided to communities. Our request includes $58.5 million for rural water projects, including almost $25 million for North Dakota's Garrison Diversion Unit. It leverages $1 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law funding to accelerate the completion of these long-needed projects and has enabled us to complete the Fort Peck Dry Prairie project in Montana later this year. The department remains committed to upholding our trust responsibilities to tribal nations. Over the past 3 years, Interior has allocated $2.43 billion available through bill to address Indian water rights settlements. And in addition to these investments, the request for reclamation in FY25 includes $181 million to support the White Mountain Apache Tribe's water settlement agreement. The administration also proposes legislation to expand the Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund, a proposal that would provide $2.8 billion in mandatory funding over 10 years to help ensure community commitments are honored, as well as funding for operation and maintenance costs. We are committed to working with you and the subcommittee and our partners across the American West in carrying out our mission, and our FY 2025 budget supports these actions. Again, I thank the subcommittee, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much to all of you. We will now begin a round of 5-minute questions. I ask all of our colleagues to keep track of your clock and stay within those 5 minutes. Assistant Secretary Connor and General Spelman, I know you've both mentioned in your opening remarks and have been up to see the Key Bridge cleanup efforts, and I really want to thank you for the Corps' immediate and sustained response to the collapse of the Key Bridge. As we have previously discussed, it is important that the Corps has the funding needed to clean up the Key Bridge and to reopen the Port of Baltimore. I know that the Corps is working to finalize a cost estimate and is using excess funds for immediate needs, but there seems to be difficulty in identifying the old funds that are available. So can you tell me how much funding is needed for the Key Bridge cleanup, how much you are able to reprogram, and your plan to cover the remaining need? Secretary.
Thank you, Senator Murray, and then I'll turn to General Spelman real quick for some elaboration. First, I don't have a firm fixed cost estimate at this point in time. This is unprecedented, complex, unique work that we're doing, so we're monitoring the spend rate right now. Currently, we've obligated around $36 to $37 million in the recovery efforts. By the end of this week, I think we're issuing another contract installment this week, so we'll be at $48 million that we've obligated by the end of this week. And we're about 50% complete with the work that's being done. So that provides some parameters. We've also been using the Baltimore Harbor O&M funding account, of which we had about $53 million coming into this year, plus the 2024 work plan. So that's the source of the funds right now. We've almost exhausted that based on the numbers I've just given you, and we've identified funds that we can do an emergency reprogramming on. We've identified funds unallocated bipartisan infrastructure law O&M money that we had access to that we hadn't yet distributed, and we've identified as a fallback, we've got some other reprogramming that we can do, and then finally, as
do you know how much you're able to reprogram? Do you have?
We've done about 20 million right now, and I think we're looking at about another 20 million as a potential source for reprogrammings. And then as a fallback, if we need to ensure that we've got the resources necessary, we identified in the FY 2024 work plan the Baltimore Harbor Donor and Energy Transfer Port money. So we want to make use of that for its intended purpose. It's a fallback in case we need it. So we think with those resources and that contingency that we will be well positioned to carry out this mission. Just the last point I guess I would make is we are taking from other accounts and needs. We will account for that. We will make sure you all understand that so those funds can be replenished General Spelman?
Senator Murray, I would just say that's correct. We're halfway done with the work in the channel. The big cost drivers up front were the mobilization. 11 large cranes that we brought to the Port of Baltimore, all the way from New York, New Jersey, from tools all the way from Galveston, Texas. The cost uncertainty that we have moving forward really is how deep do we have to go to get the remaining wreckage out of the channel. In the one half channel, the north side of the channel that's open today, in some cases we had to go down 60 feet to get all the pavement and steel out. So we have a little bit of uncertainty on the south side of the channel. The vessel is still in the way. Hopefully that will be moved this week, and we'll be able to bring down the uncertainty even more. I would just also add, we are looking for savings at every opportunity. One example is we have a lot of mixed material coming up. Mud mixed with concrete, mixed with steel. For us to process that in the state of Maryland, that was an estimate to the tune of about $40 million. We're going to transport that to New Jersey, where we have an existing facility that can deal with it at less than half the price, for about $16 million. So we will keep you and every member of the committee informed, ma'am, and work to bring this, open this channel at lowest cost possible.
Thank you. Let me ask one other question before my time's out. The State Department and actually numerous government agencies are negotiating a modernized treaty for the Columbia River. I've been watching this process very closely. I know everyone is working really hard, but Commissioner Tootin and Assistant Secretary Connor, we're all hopeful for an agreement that provides stability, but the fact is we're not there yet. If there is no agreement by September, the Corps and Reclamation Bureau will have to change how they operate facilities in the basin. Are you engaging with the tribes and BPA and public utilities about potential changes to operations as we get closer to FY25?
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to jump in, Commissioner. Yes, we're engaging with all stakeholders, and yes, you are correct. We are not there yet with the agreement. We are working around the clock to try and change those circumstances, but without changed circumstances, without an agreement, operations will need to change when the treaty flood control provisions expire in September of this year. Right. So we did a preliminary round of outreach to tribes, stakeholders, members of the congressional delegations last fall. Based on that, we took back that input. We're finishing some technical work, modeling, so we can do another round coming into June of briefings and then public outreach, because we've got a plan for that inevitability now. Commissioner?
The answer for us also, Madam Chair, is yes. We're engaged with the irrigators, with the power users, with the sovereign nations across the board.
I appreciate it. It's really important that all the stakeholders in the region are included in these discussions about the potential changes that are coming. So I appreciate that and want to stay informed. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, as you know, the pumps in our new storm protection system in New Orleans are corroding, and I know the Corps is working on it. Thank you for that. Who did we buy the pumps from?
So it was a joint venture, a contractor.
Who was it?
Sir, I'll get you the specific names of the joint venture.
Well, are they going to stand behind their product?
Sir, we've reached a settlement agreement with the joint venture, and we will begin that work after hurricane season. The interim fixes on the remaining 4 pumps in the system will be complete by the 1st of June, so we'll have every pump available for this hurricane season. Okay. Then we'll go to work on the long-term repairs.
And you said you reached a settlement with your joint venture partner. I assume that's the pump manufacturer?
Yes, sir.
How much money are they putting up?
Sir, I can get you all. I don't have those details here.
Would you? I mean, they need to stand behind their project. This project's brand new, and the pumps are corroding. And I really would like to see more about the settlement that you worked out with them.
Okay. Yes, sir. We're going to deliver on a 35-year design life. That's our commitment to you.
Yes, sir. I want to ask you about another project, General. I know you're familiar with it. That's the grain elevator project in Wallace, Louisiana, by Greenfield, Louisiana. It's a $225 million project. It's not a petrochemical plant. It's a grain elevator project. We'll export grain. It's going to create about 100 new jobs, good jobs, about $75,000 apiece. The community wants it. The Planning and Zoning Commission in the community just approved the rezoning, But we've reached a point in this country where it takes longer to go to medical school, or it takes longer to get a permit for a project than it does to go to medical school. And when are we going to make a decision? The project needs a permit from the Corps. I'm not telling you what decision to make. This company's already spent $25 million, and they're going on, what, a couple of years? It's fish or cut bait time. Can you tell me when we're going to have a decision from the Corps?
Yes, sir. So soon. This is a controversial permit. There's parties for and against this particular project. So the current friction that we're working through, sir, is adherence to the National Historic Preservation Act, specifically Section 106, on 6 historic properties that are in the region. So we've got the information that we needed from all of our consulting parties. Colonel Jones is going through that now. He will make the decision, likely here very soon, on whether or not that needs to be elevated to the keeper of the registry of the National Register for decision. We expect to have that decision very soon.
Can I ask you a question, General? This is the Corps' call, is it not? I mean, I know if the historic preservation folks, they're entitled to input, but they don't have veto power, do they?
Sir, I don't know. Whether or not it gets elevated, I believe, is Colonel Jones's call.
Yeah, it's the Corps' call. And I know there's some people who don't want it. I understand that, and they're entitled to their opinion. But at some point, the Corps' got to make a decision. And you're not going to make everybody happy here. But time is money. And that's all I'm asking is that you go ahead and make a decision. Give me a quick update. Do I have any time left? Thank you, Senator Hovind. I love Hovind. Can you give me a quick update on the Morganza to the Gulf of Mexico project?
Yes, sir. Yesterday, we completed the initial NEPA work, signed the finding of no significant impact, and we completed the plans and specs for what we call Reach A. So that's the 5-mile gap on the southwest side of this 98-mile system. We'll get that contract out for solicitation next and intend to award a construction contract in July.
Okay. No, I got 35 seconds, Senator Hovind tells me. Quick update on the St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana feasibility study.
Yes, sir. I will take that chief's report briefing from the New Orleans district on the 28th of May. We'll sign that, and we'll get that to Congress for their consideration in Word of 24.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you. I know, but Senator Hovind can have my time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Tootin, the Elvado Dam rehabilitation project in New Mexico is now 3 years behind schedule. Reclamation actually announced a stop work notice in March. Last year, the loss of water storage in Elvado was the primary reason that the Rio Grande actually ran dry in the Albuquerque stretch for the first time in nearly 40 years. What is Reclamation doing to get the repairs at Elvado Dam moving?
Good morning, Senator. As you know, Elvado Dam was constructed in the 1930s. It's one of the few structures that's a steel face plate dam on an earthen infrastructure. So as we're looking to upgrade that to this century's criteria, we have run into some challenges with that project. And so what we're doing now is looking at what we can have as a safe reservoir restriction to be able to store as much water as possible. We're working very closely with the districts, but we're also working with our sister agencies, specifically with how we can store water, Pueblo water, in Abiquiu Reservoir.
And what's the status of being able to store that water in Abiquiu Reservoir?
We'll be able to know more, and I can follow up in the record for you on that.
What's the timeline for actually getting Elvado finished?
Unfortunately, Senator, it's a little longer than we anticipated, given the challenges that we're seeing.
And what does that look like?
I can provide a more detailed timeline for you for the record, but it probably is
Are we
a year
talking
or so.
Months or years?
Closer to a year.
A year.
I'll follow up for the record, Senator.
Okay. So on another issue that I'm not particularly happy to raise today, you know that my commitment to deliver for the Eastern New Mexico rural water project has never wavered, and we made major progress thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law. But Reclamation's budget line item for this is $60,000, which suggests to me that your commitment is wavering. I have to ask you, will Reclamation honor its promise to provide the remaining funding for the Eastern New Mexico Rural Water Project so that it can actually be completed on time?
We are committed to this project, Senator. In the last 3 years, we've provided $302 million to this project, including $231 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law. I was just there last fall around the Clovis Air Force Base area and look forward to continuing to meet our commitment to deliver water to those communities.
The progress has been great in recent years. I'm just trying to make sense of a budget line item that seems to be missing a zero.
We look to leverage additional funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law to be able to make our commitments to that rural water project and others.
I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Between Reclamation and the Corps, 20 of the 24 dams that are operated in New Mexico right now are classified as high hazard potential. Maybe I'll start with Secretary Connor. What are your timelines for assessing and completing the repairs that are necessary on these structures to just maintain public safety? Your mic.
Apologize, Senator.
Secretary.
If I could, on the operational side, refer to General Spelman on the status of that work.
General.
No, Senator Heinrich, thank you for the question. I'm responsible for 745 dams in the country. 9 of them are in New Mexico. Our data is different. I don't have any in New Mexico that are high or very high risk. I've got 1 that meets all dam safety guidelines, 2 low risk, and 2 at moderate.
Okay, we'll share our data with you just to be sure. And with regard to Reclamation,
We are tracking the same. We have 9 reclamation dams. We talked about Elvado already, but it'd be good to compare notes on the facilities, and we'll provide timelines appropriately,
great.
Senator.
I look forward to that. Since I have 27 seconds left, Secretary Connor, talk to me about the Army Corps' plans for removing jetty jacks in the Rio Grande, especially in the middle Rio Grande stretch, where we know that there are severe issues with respect to public safety. Every time we have a bosque fire, or General, you want to jump in on this? It's a real challenge for our firefighters to deal with those jetty jacks, which are all connected with wires as well. So they represent a very severe impediment to our firefighters being able to operate in those areas.
Yes, sir. Wildfire response and important for environmental restoration, I would argue. Sir, we've done this work before in the state. Our authority and our funding limited us to the Albuquerque area. We are absolutely capable of expanding this effort, and we can work with you on the additional authority funding needed to take this more to the middle Rio Grande.
Great. No, I look forward to working with you on that. It's a fairly severe problem for boaters as well, because they're now stretched in the actual channel of the river, and then a very severe problem for our firefighters.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Secretary Connor, to quote a very wise and esteemed gentleman, it takes longer to get an EIS done these days than it does to go through medical school. And that seems to be the case because we have Dakota Access pipeline project that has now been operating without a problem, without incident for 6 years, moving more than 500,000 barrels of the lightest, sweetest crude we produce in this nation from the state of North Dakota, including from the 3 affiliated tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, Arabica Nation, much of it coming from that source, to markets, out in the eastern part of the country and so forth, oil that we don't have to get from OPEC or Russia or Venezuela or anyone else, because we produce it right here at home. And this is a pipeline with the latest, greatest technologies and safeguards, probably exceeding any in the country. And so we've been waiting for a final EIS now for 6 years while it's operated safely. And thank goodness, General Spelman, it has been able to operate because the country very much needs that energy. When can we expect a resolution and final approval of the project through this EIS project? Process, excuse me.
Senator Hoven, thank you for the question. Quite frankly, the process has taken quite a long time, and I'm responsible for some of that. In the aftermath of coming on into this position, I requested the Corps to go back and do more work with respect to spill risk assessment as well as spill response, to look at the tribal treaty rights closer, and then finally to look at how we're evaluating greenhouse gas emissions. So we've moved forward with that. We got the draft environmental impact statement out on the street, as you know, last year, and we've got still a very significant volume of comments and very substantive comments. I have been representing to you and others in the delegation and the governor that we would complete this work by the end of this calendar year. And unfortunately, I think it's going to take a little bit longer at this point in time to ensure that we do this work thoroughly, respond to the comments, and build a record to make this a defensible piece of work, and we don't have to do it over again. As you know, there's been a lot of litigation. We need to complete that work. So I'm looking at, we've moved probably into 2025. I'm working with the team to assess what specifically needs to be done, and so to come up with a firmer timeline, and I will get that information back to you, Senator.
You will commit to keep our office fully informed as you go through the process, as well as the state of North Dakota and the 3 affiliated tribes?
Absolutely,
nation.
sir.
Thank you. General Spelman, did you have anything to add to that process, sir?
Sir, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Secretary, also, are you working to expand the WIFIA loan process to non-federal levies? As you know, we've worked very hard to give you that capability along with our ranking member. It's an incredible tool. EPA has used it very successfully. Corps started to use it. One of the first projects was the Red River Valley water supply project, north of $3 billion project. Incredible tool. Are you going to use it for non-federal levies, which would be a huge benefit, I think, for the Corps?
Senator Hoven, you and I are in complete sync on this, and you've used this very effectively in Fargo-Moorhead, quite frankly, to add to the public-private partnership there, so thank you for that. I am working diligently to get we're calling it now the SWIFT-P, Core Water Infrastructure Financing Program, SWIFT-P program up and going. We've got the rule in place. We solicited proposals. We have those proposals, and now we want to take the next step of inviting full applications. I'm trying to get that done as quickly as possible within the next month because this is, non-federal investments in key infrastructure across the country. So now with the 2024 work plan and the expansion to levies, non-federal levies, we want to do the same. I think we're going to have to go through amending our rule to include that because right now it's just non-federal dams rehabilitation. We want to include the levies, make use of the resources provided. This is a good program and we will work on it expeditiously.
I would think both for our chair and ranking member in their states, there would be a lot of utility just across the country as well. I mean, this is an incredible tool for y'all. General Spelman, did you want to add on that? And then also, as you know, we need comprehensive protection on the SURS, and we got to fix those dead loops. You can't have stinking dead loops in the middle of a town. It isn't. They stink and they look terrible, and you all need to help us fix it.
Yes, sir. So on the Oxbow Lakes and Minot, so we've got the request from the city. We're putting a workshop together with our St. Paul district, and we're going to bring some of our best research scientists up from our labs in Vicksburg. We're going to have that workshop in August, and I'll report out to you at the end of that, sir, on our way ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. I am a big fan of the Army Corps. You have been very helpful to us in New Hampshire. We have several small harbors, and you have been very responsive as we've tried to deal with dredging in those small harbors where shoaling has been a consistent problem. And one of the reasons that you've been able to do that is because of the funding for small, remote subsistence harbors. And can you speak, Assistant Secretary Connor, maybe you could speak to the impact of funding for these small harbors on local communities where so much of the economy in those communities is tied to the harbor?
Yes, Senator, I can't think of something I hear more about when I'm out making visits than the importance of these harbors, whether it be on the East Coast, whether it be in Alaska, Chesapeake Bay. So I know the reliance that communities have on the work that we can do to ensure that these harbors can continue operations. And so from that standpoint, with the WRDA 2020 provision that targeted 15% of our Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund funds going for small harbors, and then the follow-up provisions in WRDA 2022. The good news is, while there's still a very high demand out there, is that we've increased our budget request consistent with the targets of the 15%. We've exceeded in some cases, barely met it in others, but the trajectory has been in the right direction. So we recognize the importance and appreciate the leadership from Congress directing us in this area.
Well, thank you. And I agree the trajectory is going in the right direction, but it's going very slowly in the right direction. And Congress has consistently noted that the administration's criteria for navigation maintenance projects disadvantages small, remote, or subsistence harbors and waterways. And so how does the Army Corps account for needs at these small harbors, given that? And I know we have a huge backlog for ports and harbors, small ports and harbors across the country. So how are we going to get to that backlog and actually address the challenges that communities are facing? Either one of you.
Yes, Senator. First, thank you. So I'm responsible for 577 of these navigation channels, and 440 of them meet the criteria for small, low-use harbors. And we greatly appreciate the language that has allowed increased draws on the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund and the targets that Congress has set out for us for the increased investment. As Mr. Connor said, we are exceeding, this year we will exceed those targets. But you're right, there's 440 of them, and the demand is greater than the need. And we just have to keep pressing stay on this important work. We realize how important these are to localities in the regions where they're located.
And so would it be helpful to you to have Congress direct that a higher percentage of the funding goes to those small harbors?
Senator, we will certainly follow the direction of Congress.
That was a very diplomatic response. One of the things that we are struggling with across the country is the impacts of climate change. What's the Corps doing to think long-term about the investments that we need to make to address existing waterways and how we respond to climate change?
I think this is a question that both of us will like to tackle, but I'll start first. I think a lot of things in recognition. So, the bipartisan infrastructure law ramped up investments, prioritized resilient type investments, so we got to initiate projects and continue projects that we think were critical from a safety standpoint and a risk standpoint, integrating climate change. So investments right now is part of that equation. The Corps has been doing—
Give me some examples.
Examples of, North Slope of Alaska, where the accelerated wave action, the lack of sea ice accelerates, the impact on the coast. And so that's actually disaster supplemental money that we've got now, but then we follow that up with investments to do coastal protection work there in Alaska. That's a perfect example where climate change has really been focused. Norfolk, one of the most at-risk communities from sea level rise. Very significant investment to get that coastal storm risk management project up and going. So it could go on. There's riverine examples in the arid west, in Little Colorado, in Arizona, where we've made similar investments. But also, we are building the tools, and this is, kind of below the radar screen, but, the Corps is looking at different tools to measure hydrology changes, flow and stages on our riverine systems, as well as the constant updating of our sea level models, ensuring that we integrate that into our planning processes as we're developing new projects, quite frankly. And then, where we can, because of the costs involved, integrate engineering with nature so that we can work with nature as opposed to fighting nature in a lot of these examples. If I could, General Spelman, that's
Senator, I would just say, to add to everything Mr. Connor just said, I want to thank this committee for the increased investment that you're making in our research and development programs. Back in the early 80s, we invested about 2.5% of our civil works budget into R&D. 3 years ago, we weren't at 2.5%. We were like at 0.2%. So these last two budgets, you have increased our R&D budget fivefold, and that is going to very important work on coastal projects. It's going to important work on our inland projects, examples like forecast-informed reservoir operations, or aquifer storage and recovery wells in Florida, or water quality R&D testing that we're doing in a number of locations around the country. I think that it gets at a response to your question, what can we do long-term, and it's in the laboratory.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Chair Murray and Ranking Member Kennedy, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. We have a short period of time to ask questions, but Secretary Connor and General Spelman, I want to cover 3 topics, if I can, during this questioning time or the next round. Arabica Dam and the Yazoo Backwater Area Project, which I really appreciate everybody's work on that. And then if we could get to some more Mississippi River tributaries questions. But Arabica Dam for Secretary Connor and General Spelman. As you know, Arabica Lake is an authorized Mississippi River and Tributaries Flood Control Project in northwest Mississippi, Tate and DeSoto counties. That was completed in 1943. But the lake encompasses about 57,000 acres and provides flood protection for more than 19,000 Mississippians. A depression was found near the base of the dam last year, igniting major concerns if left untreated. A core risk assessment summary stated that if Arabica Dam breached or failed, floodwaters would be deep and swift enough to damage and destroy homes, buildings, roads, bridges, and power and water supplies, and in their words, even cause loss of life. I understand the Corps is taking a deep look at the problem, but also that the lake would need to be lowered enough for the engineers to make assessment, which means releasing more water into the Coldwater River, potentially more than ever before, and flooding tens of thousands of acres of farmland. And this could be a multi-year, multi-million-dollar endeavor. My questions for you are, will you prioritize addressing this problem as quickly as possible? Farmers alone have already invested hundreds of millions of dollars putting crops in the ground this year, which would be wiped away with a bad turn of events. Should the White House submit any type of emergency supplemental appropriations request to Congress in the near future before the Arabica Dam issue is resolved, would you commit to ensuring this project is part of the conversation? If you ask folks who live in that area, they would certainly tell you this is a high-risk emergency scenario.
Senator, I would tell you public safety is our #1 priority. So the Vicksburg District, they're currently implementing what we call interim risk reduction measures. You've described some of them. To take the pressure off of the dam, yes, lowering the lake level. We're also installing additional relief wells. We're increasing surveillance, both with tools and with human eyes, and we'll continue our active communications with the community. Simultaneously, with these risk reduction measures, we're also in design looking at, we call it a dam safety modification study. What is the long-term fix? So I'll know more on cost and to inform a supplemental discussion as we advance in the dam safety modification study.
Senator Hyde-Smith, I would just add that with respect, I know there's other discussions going on about disaster supplemental, emergency supplemental. We will be very prepared to participate in those discussions based on needs, risk, and ongoing expenditures that we have to deal with emergencies.
Thank you, because it is critical for my state and certainly that area right now. And question 2 is about the Yazoo Backwater Area projects that we have spent many, many, many hours on, and the status of the environmental review. And again, I am so grateful to everyone at the Corps who's been involved in addressing this flood affecting the Yazoo Backwater area. And a solution to this problem is long overdue. I mean, we're talking decades here. But I understand the following, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The Corps last year signed a memorandum of collaboration with EPA and other supporting federal agencies to address the flood risk in this area. A new preferred alternative has been proposed, agreed upon by all federal partners, supported by local interest, and a draft supplemental environmental impact study is expected in the near future, and the goal for a final EIS to be published this fall, and God willing, a record of decision to be signed. My questions for you, are we still on track, and do you agree that the people trying to live, raise families, put food on the table, and do business in the Yazoo backwater area have the right to this federally authorized flood protection? And would you agree that pumping stations are not a new concept?
Senator, as you know, 'cause I've been out there with with you, and I've been out there a total 4 or 5 times, I believe, working on this issue. So with respect to the information you provided, yes, I think it was 2022 when we signed our memorandum of collaboration. EPA included Fish and Wildlife Service. So federal agencies are working in alignment on this, which hasn't always been the case. Two, we have a new water management proposal, including pumps, how we operate those pumps, adaptive management, and in non-structural measures that we're putting together as part of the environmental impact statement process. So we are on track to move forward with the draft EIS, hopefully release that in the next 30 to 45 days. Get that on the street and take comment. We expect there'll be a lot of interest in that, but the goal is to, by late fall, end of the calendar year, have this process concluded. So I would agree. You know, I've listened to the stories. We can't replicate the 2019 situation that occurred there. It's very important that we continue to work on this project, and we have backwater pumps in other parts of the Mississippi River where we have completed that work.
Great. Thank you for your answer. I'm good with that.
Thank you. Senator Brett.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First, want to tell each of you that appreciate you being here and being in front of this committee today. Also see several Alabamians in the here in the hearing, and want to say welcome. Glad you're here, and thank you for all that you do for our great state. Mr. Connor and Lieutenant General Spelman, I would first like to follow up on what we discussed at last year's hearing. We discussed different ways that the port, like the Port of Mobile, should be able to use their port energy funds. I was going through the work plan that you released earlier this week and read the section identifying the expanded uses and activities for these port energy funds. I'd like to thank you both for following through on your commitment to re-examining the capabilities for ports to use these funds for channel, berth, and other dredged material management activities. I would also like to take this time to thank Brigadier General Hibner's team with the South Atlantic Division, and specifically Colonel Chapman's team at the Mobile District for their actions to gather the necessary funding to rapidly begin and soon complete the repairs to the lock in Demopolis, Alabama. I have really been blown away by everyone's willingness to work together to achieve that goal and get the lock back open. Colonel Chapman's team has been very responsive both to myself and my team over the last few months following the lock's failure, and it's exactly the way that this should operate. Mr. Connor or Lieutenant General Spelman, I understand that traffic is set to return to the Demopolis lock within the next 2 weeks. Do you all foresee any impediments to that? And with the lock reopening, I want to see if you feel like it will be on time.
No, great question, Senator. We're on track to complete all of our work by the 30th of May, 30th of this month.
Okay, excellent. It's wonderful news. It's great when we can do things on time. I think it saves money, saves energy, and it's certainly vitally important to the economics of that entire region and beyond. So thank you so much. It's great news to hear. I also want to speak about another project, the Mobile Harbor Deepening Project, which I understand is on schedule for completion March 30th of 2025. So just under a year. Last year, I think, Mr. Connor, I think you visited the Port of Mobile immediately prior to this hearing. You told me you believed the project was going to be completed on time. Question for both of you here. Do you still expect that project to be completed on time?
Senator, last contract will be awarded next month, and we're on track to complete this work in March of 2025.
That is wonderful. I have noticed obviously a theme and have discussed this with Colonel Chapman, but fully funding major projects at the beginning results in projects being completed on time and raises the likelihood that projects remain on budget or potentially in some cases under budget. As of today, the Mobile Harbor Ship Channel Widening and Deepening project, which was fully funded at the start by the federal government, which obviously some in the media irresponsibly and falsely reported otherwise, but it is both on time and on budget. On this, in 2023, for the first time in years, Chair Murray and Vice Chair Collins led the Senate Appropriations Committee in public markups and advanced all 12 bills by July 27th. I am grateful for both of their leadership and making this a priority. Unfortunately, it took 174 days, though, after the fiscal year to get all 12 appropriations bills signed into law, and it was actually 236 days since this Appropriations Committee actually did their work. Mr. Connor and Lieutenant General Spelman, do endless continuing resolutions raise the cost, and some people know them as CRs, but do they raise the cost and length of the timeliness for major projects? And would a return to more regular order, this body doing its job on time for the American people, allow the Corps to be more responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars?
Senator Britt, thank you for the question. Yes, the continuing resolutions process makes it very hard to complete the work that we're trying to accomplish. As a threshold matter, I would just acknowledge what full funding, obviously most optimum, very significant funding for blocks of work like Howard Hansen Dam, which we need to do, obviously creates significant efficiencies and allow us to move through the most complex aspects of our work. And CRs are the worst part of that spectrum of how we fund things. We have those projects that aren't fully funded are typically base plus option type contracts, and then we start chasing options as to whether we can pick them or not up or not if we're in continuing resolutions. If we don't pick them up, they get rebid. Chances are that the cost will be significantly higher and that labor will go elsewhere.
Madam Chairman, would you allow me just one more minute? I am so grateful for you saying that. I mean, these women have led this committee in a remarkable way, and it is ultimately the hardworking Americans that pay the price when the body does not do its work, when Congress does not pass these bills on time. And so I appreciate you speaking directly to that, because when you rebid something, everybody knows that price does not go down, it goes up. So not only do you not have the predictability you need, it ultimately costs the taxpayer more. And two things I just wanted to make sure that that I mentioned before I conclude. First is the Wilson Lock in Florence, Alabama. It lost buoyancy and sank to the bottom of the reservoir. I understand that TVA is pursuing interim solutions, but I think it's extremely important that we work together and examine all possible routes for a permanent repair to the guide wall. And then second, the Selma Flood Risk Mitigation Project. It would construct a wall along the bank of the Alabama River, and we all know that Selma is not just a crown jewel of Alabama, it is a crown jewel with historic nature for our entire country. And so making sure that we prevent the river from further eroding the bank and causing historic buildings to fall into the water. This project's very important to me. It's also very important to Congresswoman Sewell. And the floods threaten a nationally registered historic district, and we look forward to working with you all on making sure that we get this right. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator Britt. We will now do a second round for anyone who wishes to ask additional questions. And I will start, Assistant Secretary Connor, with you. This subcommittee requires quarterly execution reports from each agency. Both your office and the Corps indicated there's no system that can provide that information, yet we have other agencies, like the Department of Energy, that are able to provide that information to us. These reports are really critical to this subcommittee. They really ensure that the Corps is executing funding in accordance with the law and that we are putting limited funding to best uses. Can you explain how you are working to update the Corps budget and execution software to address this issue?
I will start, Senator Murray. We don't have any, right now, moving forward, system in place to provide all the relevant information. I think, with respect to the budget and execution reports that you expect and that you need to do your work. We've now got into a rhythm and we've had internal discussions about how we can get the information to you on time. It would certainly be facilitated better if we had the system that delivered that information out immediately. It still requires some analysis, and it's complex in the sense that our 902 limits continue to change year to year with inflation figures, and some of the information will be hard to just put in a system itself. So we need to do a deeper dive. I know the Corps has done a lot of work on their information systems, mostly related to project execution, and see if we can't somehow over the future meld the needs with the information system we got, because we're not doing any significant changes at this point in time, even while getting you the information.
No, Senator Murray, I would be happy to visit with Department of Energy and see what system they're using so we can get you timely reports. To be frank, today I could not invest in that IT system. And the reason is, if you go back 15 years, the Corps had a $30 billion construction program, and we were funded for oversight for about 1,460 people. Today, the workload is 3 times that. We're a $92 billion program, and I'm funded for fewer people to provide that oversight. So finding dollars to invest into an IT system, it would be challenging for us at the moment. But again, I will follow up with Department of Energy and see how they're doing it.
Would you just be willing to work with our subcommittee to make sure we get those systems in place?
Yes, Senator.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Commissioner Tootin, the Yakima Basin is experiencing the second year of drought conditions and reduced water allocations. Thankfully, the Yakima Basin Integrated Plan partners have proposed drought mitigation and resiliency projects critical to conserving and managing the Yakima River Basin's natural resources, their water supply, and economic and environmental well-being. Those projects can help mitigate drought effects this year and in the future, and I understand the Inflation Reduction Act provided funding that can quickly get those projects underway. How is Reclamation executing the remaining IRA funds, and are those funds available for basins that are currently experiencing drought like the Yakima Basin?
Thank you, Senator. The Yakima Basin project is the model across the West for how you deal with climate change and aridification while dealing with agricultural sovereign nations and the ecosystem. Our budget includes $35.5 million for the Water Enhancement Project. And regarding your question on Inflation Reduction Act, we made our first announcement for other basins, $60 million in the Rio Grande, New Mexico, and we look forward to working with you to help the Yakima Basin get through this year and for the future.
I appreciate that. Finally, General Spelman, Congress has consistently, almost annually since 2018, provided supplemental funding to address natural disasters. In 2018, Congress provided $15 billion in a supplemental for the Corps to construct critical flood projects. However, we understand there is now more than $10 billion in additional need to complete what was started. It is important we finish what we start, and that is impossible when total project costs continue to increase drastically, which is why FY24, this committee provided dedicated funds to start addressing some of the critical failure points, such as underdeveloped project design and a failure to do periodic cost updates. In addition to this committee's actions, what is the Corps doing right now to address cost overruns and incorporate lessons learned to correct those issues?
Senator, a number of things. First, I will share with you, we're not alone. The federal people that build for the federal government are dealing with this. People that building for states and private industry, everyone is dealing with cost increases, primarily in labor market. That's the number one cost driver on our projects. We're doing a number of things. First, we're hiring more cost engineers. A year ago, I had 350 of them on our staff. Today, I have 463, and we're working to hire the remaining 27. For the size program I have, I need about 500. We're almost there. We're changing the way that we report costs and our estimates to the administration and to Congress. We're going to tell you what design maturity, is it a 10% design, a 20% design, what assumptions went into that, and what the range of costs could be looking at the potential construction timeline for the project. We are meeting routinely with industry, specifically the Associated General Contractors of America, who represents all of the construction trades. We're meeting with their economists so we understand more specifically the regional impacts of materials and labor. And the last one, we're working hard to get industry involved, more early contractor involvement type acquisition strategies in our projects so we get more industry feedback in all that we're doing. We're committed to this, and we're committed to greater transparency with you.
Okay, I appreciate that. And if you can share with our committee any steps that we can take in FY25 to help address those issues, particularly related to increased design maturity, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
I want to defer to Senator Durbin.
Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. I appreciate that very much. Assistant Secretary Connor, it's good to see you again and the other colleagues. The Great Lakes contains 21% of the world's fresh water. 1 out of every 10 Americans rely on the Great Lakes for drinking water. From an economic standpoint, the Great Lakes support 311,000 jobs across a variety of industry, $8.8 billion in wages. For years, we have worked to move the Brandon Road Interbasin project at the Brandon Road Lock and Dam near Joliet. This project is critical to preventing an invasive species of carp from reaching the Great Lakes. For over 10 years, I've dedicated a large part of my public service to that dam fish. We all know the importance of keeping this fish out of the Great Lakes. They already have shifted the ecological balance of the Mississippi River significantly. I have helped secure more than $272 million for this project. But as I understand it, the funding will not become available until an agreement is reached between the Army Corps of Engineers and my state of Illinois. This is a regional issue, not just our state concerned about it. The state of Michigan has just shown a remarkable commitment to solving this problem with us, and I want to thank them. I commend you for the role that you played in moving toward construction. But before we can get to this step, there needs to be a project partnership agreement between the local sponsor, the state of Illinois, and the Army Corps. What will happen on June 30th if a project partnership agreement between the Army Corps of Engineers and the state of Illinois is not signed?
Prospect for, Senator, thank you for the question. Prospect for increased costs associated with the project if we don't get the PPA in place by the end of June of this year. And that's primarily because we need to coordinate some of the work that we need to do on Brandon Road with the closure on the Illinois waterway for maintenance work that we do. So we get efficiencies out of that if we combined that construction activity. So that is why we've articulated the end of June is incredibly important. Thank you very much for all you've done to help work through the issues. And I'm happy to elaborate more on where we are trying to get to PPA if you would like.
I understand you received a letter from the governor of Illinois asking questions about the project. Have you responded to that letter?
I've responded by talking to the governor directly. The governor requested that we sign an incremental PPA for a phase of this project. We don't think that this project can be broken down into phases that are usable increments. We need to complete the whole project. So I wanted to talk to the governor about that directly before sending him a letter. We talked through some of the state's concerns with respect to ensuring cost certainty, long-term OM&R. We had a good conversation. I still need to respond to him, the record. I don't believe we can sign an incremental PPA. We can work on items associated with that cost certainty and OM&R. And I also think it's important that we bring Michigan into the discussions, which I know is happening at the local level. But I think that's important for us to be able to try and hit that PPA June 30th.
Let me once again thank Michigan, the governor, and both senators, my colleagues, have really gone overboard trying to help us, and I want to thank them for this. Do you think the ball is in the Corps' court at this point, or is Illinois waiting on a response from you?
I think the governor's waiting for a response from me. We've been in contact with his team. After he and I talked, I would like to get that response out to lay the foundation for the next set of steps we need to take to get to a final PPA.
With June 30th deadline looming, can you give me your assurance that you will look at this matter as soon as perhaps today?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank the Corps for their efforts on the Quincy Bay. That means a lot to me and to the people in that community, so thank you for moving forward on that. I see my time is just about up, but I want to ask the last question about the infamous Bubbly Creek in Chicago. Will you commit to expediting interagency discussions with the EPA to ensure there is no further delay in the restoration of this area?
Yes, sir. We would like to get this project up and going as quickly as we can, and I know this issue, particularly as it relates to hazardous toxic radioactive waste, the HTRW issue is one that we've got to work through with all the agencies, so we're committed to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
General, in my opening comments, I talked about how, in my judgment, the Corps of Engineers and its projects actually save us money. Do you think I'm right about that?
Sir, you're absolutely correct.
Okay. I'm a big fan, by the way, of the Corps, like Senator Shaheen, like all of us. I just worry about how we fund you. The president's budget, I know it's not your budget. You've got to claim it, but I get it. You wouldn't do it the same way. It was thrust upon you. But let's take the Inland Waterways Trust Fund. How do we fund that?
Yes, sir. So this is a tax on transporters on our inland waterway system, and those funds are collected into the specific fund.
But we don't spend all the money. We collect the tax from people, but we don't, and we say it's for inland waterways, but we don't spend all the money on inland waterways, do we?
We don't. That's correct.
We spend it elsewhere in the budget, right?
Can I jump in on that?
Sure.
With respect to, I looked a lot at this issue as we were finalizing the work plan, Senator. We have a $300 million, account right now within the Waterways Trust Fund, and we generally get about $100 to $120 million worth of revenue. We had the opportunity to make a choice based on the work plan of whether or not we went into the trust fund this year. I chose not to do that. We had the opportunity to repurpose bipartisan infrastructure laws. So, and the reason I wanted to
Yes, sir, but before we get too far down in the weeds, we do this with the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund as well. We tax people who are using these waterways, and then we don't spend the money on the waterways. Isn't that an accurate description?
We have not used all the funds provided. That is correct, sir.
Okay. General, tell me when we can expect a Corps decision on the Greenfield project we talked about earlier.
Yes, sir. I just spoke to Colonel Jones just this morning on that. I expect we'll have that decision within the next few days.
Okay, and that will be a final decision?
It would be a decision on whether or not we need to elevate to the keeper of the National Register the issue associated with the six historic properties. The final decision, sir, will come later in the
Let's
in the
suppose
year.
you elevate it to the historic preservation community, if you will, I'll call them. You still have the final decision, right?
That's correct.
The historic preservation folks give you their advice, but their advice is not dispositive. Is that right?
Sir, I'm sorry. I may have misunderstood your earlier question. I don't know the answer to that. I only have one repetition where we had to elevate to the keeper. I will take that, sir, and follow up with you.
Yeah, but here's what I'm trying to understand. Whose decision is it? Is it you? Is it the Corps, or is it the historic preservation people?
Yeah, that's the part I don't. The final decision on the permit, the overall permit, is with the Corps. The specific issue with the National Historic Preservation Act, I'd have to follow up. I don't know.
Well, it's your decision. I mean, that's my understanding of the law. Historic preservation folks offer their input to the Corps, but the Corps either issues the permit or it doesn't. And you have the authority to say, I agree with the historic preservation people or I don't. And what I'm asking is, when do you think we'll get a final decision? I mean, what if the historic preservation folks say this is going to take us 3 or 4 years? Now we've not only finished medical school, we finished an internship and a residency and a subspecialty. So how long are you going to give the historic preservation folks to make a decision? It's not like they haven't been part of this. They've been part of this from day one.
Right.
And they don't want this project, do they?
Okay, so Senator, I've only have one repetition where we had to elevate to the
No,
keeper of the
I'm
National
trying to
Register.
understand
It didn't-
the time.
It didn't take 6 years, it took a few weeks.
Okay, so you think that the historic preservation folks, you're going to elevate it to them, and then they're going to have to give you an answer in a few weeks?
So the decision to elevate has not been made yet. That's the,
Yeah, but you're going to elevate. That's my prediction. You know, let me put my, you know, I just see an elevation in my
sir.
future, you know. After you elevate, how long are they going to take?
sir, I don't know how long
How long
they're
are
going
you
to take.
going to give them?
Sir, I don't know those answers.
We have to make a decision. We've not only finished med school here, we finished law school and going after a PhD. These permits just shouldn't take that long, General. This controversy's not going away, and I'm not telling you how to make the call. But you got to make a call here, just like on Senator Hovind's pipeline. 6 years, you know, that's not acceptable. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hovind.
I want to thank the ranking member for his comments, and he always expresses it very well, but it is important. We've got to move these projects. They're just critically important for the country, critically important infrastructure for all our states and for the country. Commissioner Touton, speaking of that, you've been actually remarkably helpful in getting advancing NDOS, the Eastern North Dakota Alternate Water Supply Project, which actually will provide water supply not only to Eastern North Dakota, but Western Minnesota as well. A lot of folks over there in the Red River Valley of the North, and you have done provided a timely process for the record of decision. We thank you for that, but now we have to, you know, get to the actual funding piece. And so my first question is, are you committed to helping us get that funded? And then second, your recommendations on how we advance this project in a timely way.
It's nice to see you, Senator Hovind. The first time we visited North Dakota, I did, was to see the water source. And then we were together again last year to be able to see the communities we would serve. And so we are committed to this. We are at a point of hitting a ceiling within the project. I know we're working with you and with other projects that may face similar situations, and look forward to continuing that conversation.
Your work on this has been critical. You've been out to our state twice. Will you commit to work closely with our staff now to continue to advance this so that we can get it done?
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you, Commissioner. General Spelman, I wanted to follow up with you on a couple things that I didn't get a chance to earlier. One is that you're doing Missouri River test flows, and you're doing these pulses for, I think, pallid sturgeon and various species. But you also have a lot of folks in eastern Montana and obviously northwestern North Dakota that are affected by this, in essence, flooding that you do. And so I want to know if you're making sure that our folks up there in northwest North Dakota are fully informed, and that you're taking any steps to mitigate flooding that you actually may be causing for fish and so forth at the expense of people.
No, sir, we're meeting our requirements under the Endangered Species Act. We're not interested in inducing flooding on anyone. We have physical monitors out in the field, and if we get any reports that there's induced flooding, we'll off-ramp the test. So that off-ramp is already built in. No, you're correct. In fact, the test this year is simply replicating the flow that we had from plain snowpack last year. Just this year, we have the additional instrumentation and monitors in the field.
Okay, and then shifting gears a little bit, Lake Skakawea, as well as the other main stem reservoirs, are huge, and they're multi-purpose, one of which is recreation. What steps can we take to develop partnerships between the Corps and local stakeholders who are willing to step up to ensure that recreational facilities are well-maintained and enhanced.
Sir, we are open to any ideas that would increase investment in recreation facilities across the country. I just think that public-private partnerships is another avenue, and it's a great idea.
And you'll emphasize that to your folks on the ground, that they should be looking for those opportunities and working with our local stakeholders.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, General. And then the last is the dam safety modification project for Garrison Dam, which is a huge project. The fiscal year 25, there's $32 million for design on it. You know, schedule and scope. I know some of your folks have talked about coming out this summer and actually going out to the dam with us and describing for the public what it is you're going to do. But I know it's a massive undertaking. So could you please describe exactly how?
Yes, sir, it is. But those dollars are design and construction. So 27 of that 32 will actually go to advancing the design. There's $4 million we want to put immediately to construction. It's the right abutment drain. It's work we can get after right away.
There was some erosion, I think, on it.
Yes, sir. And then also we're doing some work in the laboratory on this as well. There's 3 modeling efforts going on. There's some anchor testing that we need to do, and there's also some material tests in the lab that we want to conduct. We want to build this right the first time, but a very important project for us.
Okay. So Secretary Connor and John, I want to thank both of you for your leadership on these really important projects. You know, we need your help on them to complete them. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Sinema.
Thank you, Chairwoman Murray and Ranking Member Kennedy, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. As you all know, there's nothing more important to my home state of Arizona than our water resources. My constituents and I take our responsibility as water managers extremely seriously, and I appreciate the support of your agencies in achieving this mission over the years. As Arizona, the Colorado River Basin, and the West face an unprecedented drought crisis, now is the time to put aside partisan and geographic divisions to act with determination and creativity to address this crisis. Public relations campaigns that are focused on finger-pointing and zero-sum outcomes leave everyone worse off. With a booming economy driving the energy transition, Arizona cannot bear the full weight of future reductions as we look forward to post-2026 operations of the Colorado River. As you all know, I've worked hard to provide funding and policy solutions in multiple pieces of historic legislation, and I look forward to discussing this critical issue with you all today as we go forward. First, Commissioner Towton, as I alluded to in my statement, I continue to be concerned about the trajectory of post-2026 negotiations for the Colorado River. Can you provide an update on the basin-wide negotiations?
Thank you, Senator. We are currently in the alternative development stage. We've received several proposals from the upper basin states, the lower basin states, as well as the NGOs, and some tribal elements to the alternatives. We're currently in conversations with all of our partners in being able to model those alternatives to show the impacts.
As you know, we're almost halfway through the year, and nearly 2 years since the Inflation Reduction Act and the historic drought funding I secured has become law. As we've discussed in the past, the purpose of this funding is to address crisis needs and to help communities defray the impacts of potential drought-driven water delivery reductions. Can you provide a specific timeline for when Bucket 2 funding decisions will be announced?
Yes, Senator, I think you'll be pleased that we will be making those announcements here in the next weeks.
What do you mean by weeks?
I look forward to following up with you, Senator.
I'd like to get a follow-up on that. As you
Absolutely.
know, weeks could be 2 or it could be 20. I'm hoping for the 2.
It will be this summer, Senator.
Wonderful, thank you. The drought in the Colorado River Basin is now extending beyond its 20th year. The lower Colorado River Basin was in a Tier 2A shortage for 2023. As you know, the states in the lower basin had to reduce their Colorado River supplies by 617,000 acre-feet per year. As we know, Arizona took the majority of these cuts. Over the last several decades, however, there remain additional deliveries to Mexico over and above the quantity of water required by the Treaty of 1944. And while I appreciate that the Bureau has worked to address some of these flows of Colorado River water to Mexico, my understanding is that there was over 170,000 acre-feet of water delivered to Mexico above our treaty obligations due to the high salinity infrastructure needs and other issues. What is Reclamation doing to address these over-deliveries?
So 2023 was a good hydrologic year for us. It also showed us that we need more flexibility within downstream of Hoover on how we can capture some flows. And so we're actually in the process of looking at infrastructure below Hoover Dam to see how we can work through our operational flexibilities to be able to capture some of this water during these types of years.
The federal government's trust responsibilities to deliver water to our tribal communities, of course, is one of our most important duties. And I was proud to pass into law at the end of last Congress amendments to the White Mountain Apache Tribe's Water Rights Quantification Act that extended the enforcement date and expanded the authorized funding available to deliver clean water to this community. The President's budget requests $181 million for the settlement in FY25. Can you explain how this funding will be used to implement the settlement?
Absolutely. The $181 million within the President's budget request is for the planning, design, and construction of Minor Flat Dam as part of that settlement, and we look to be able to meet that enforceability date through these 3 next fiscal years to be able to hit the 2027 date that you provided us, Senator.
Thank you. I'm also concerned about the long-term viability of the river outlet works at the Glen Canyon Dam. How does the Bureau's budget request seek to address damage that has been sustained to the river outlet works?
The Glen Canyon Dam remains operable, and there are no short-term risk to deliveries within the system. What we saw was evidence of cavitation. We're already working through fixing the lining within that canal within the next year, but we're also looking at long-term solutions, including what this looks like in operations for post-2026.
Thank you. I see that my time is nearly expired. Commissioner, I'd like to follow up on the issue around the water overflow to Mexico.
Absolutely.
As you know, this every time we send too much water to Mexico, that's less that Arizona has. And of course, that creates more stress within the 7 states for our post-2026 agreement.
I look forward to following up, and thank you to your constituents for leading our efforts. We've conserved 1.7 of the 3 million acre feet as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Lake Mead is higher today than it was in May of 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you know, Arizona is very proud of the work it's done. Not only have we borne the brunt of the cuts so far, but we've also demonstrated leadership and an understanding that all 7 states must work together to solve this crisis. Madam Chair, if I may, I just would like to close my questioning by reminding fellow states that our region will either survive or fail together. And so I call on the other 6 states to join Arizona in this leadership to find a long-term solution that benefits the entire region, not pitting one state against each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here this morning. We have had an opportunity over the past year to engage on a couple of different issues in my state, certainly Homer, the Barrow coastal erosion, and I want to thank you for a pretty pragmatic approach to working with me and my team and your focus on the Alaska projects and the partnership going forward. I think the more we can be open and communicating well with one another, the better off we're going to be. I am pleased to see funding for the Port of Nome construction and the Homer GI both included in the 24 work plan as well as the FY25 budget request. As you know, these are very high priorities, particularly the Port of Nome due to its national security significance. But that being said, there's been a lot of advocacy to ensure that both of these projects stay on track. So I'm a little bit concerned going into the 25 process and beyond that we're going to appropriately prioritize these in the budget process. Concerning Nome particularly, this kind of seems to be a case study in rhetoric versus reality, with our nation's challenge to match the projects of national security and economic significance with the processes that we have at our disposal and how to fund them. We know that Port of Nome is a civil works project. Senator Sullivan and I have been talking to a lot of our national security officials and flag officers, both directly and in person and off the record, as we underscore the strategic and national security imperative into the Arctic region. A lot of dual-use benefits for both commercial and national security interests in the Arctic. where we've seen investment really lacking, and I think both of you would agree with that. And yet, while we've got some unanimity on the value of the project, we can't seem to get the same level of enthusiasm or gusto when it comes to funding it. This year's budget request of $25 million is the first regular order construction request for the project, notwithstanding NOM's previous award of $250 million for construction, which was due, of course, to IJA. So that $25 million, it's absolutely essential. I think we all know it's far from the cost to complete. So we're looking at a project that's going to be in the range of $500 million. And so I look at the $25 million request and don't see this as adequate to meet the project's requirement. Maybe it's because the project is not a great fit for the National Economic Development funding formula under which it was authorized. So I'm using my time here to suggest that it's time that the Corps work with Congress to figure out some creative ways to adequately fund this project and perhaps some others that recognizes the national security benefits as well as the economic benefits. So I'm hoping that we're going to see future budget requests that will make very meaningful progress on fully funding the project's construction costs. So I'm hoping that maybe you can give me a little more optimism here with a budget request number in FY26 that reflects the cost to complete the project. But also, I'd like to have your assurance that for future budget requests, you'll treat the projects authorized under this authority like NOM, consistent with the provision in Title 33, Section 2242C of the U.S. Code. So, in other words, making sure that it is given equivalent budget consideration and priority as projects recommended solely by national economic development benefits. A long statement there, but you know where I'm going with this. We've got to figure out what the funding plan is going to be for a port like Nome, given the national security imperative. Because if we're going to do $25 million every funding cycle, the Arctic is never going to be addressed. We need a deep water Arctic port.
Yes, Senator. So I think I'll try to give you some assurance here. I think this is more sequencing than in terms of a budget issue. So with the $250 million that came to us in the bipartisan infrastructure law and the $25 million in this budget, that's going to allow us to award what we're calling the phase one, the West Breakwater extension. We need to get that in place before we can start the work on the actual harbor deepening. We can express that capability as early as 25. That's about a $95 million job. And then the final phase of this is the new East Causeway. We estimate about $151 million, but we have what we need to get this first work done. Then we're going to work on the budget for the deepening and then the remaining work to complete the project.
Secretary Connor?
Yeah, if I could just add on the bigger picture question that you raised in your comment, I would agree this is not a great NED fit in our traditional analyses, but yet we did get it in the budget, which I think represents progress, and it's for a lot of the reasons that you've just identified. And we are working on, expanding the range of what we view the benefits of our projects are. My predecessor put in place something called comprehensive benefits, asked the Corps to look at comprehensive benefits as we're planning projects and integrate that and assess that as part of our chief's reports that we're putting together. We're trying to take that to the next step now and to look at institutionalizing that approach through our principles, requirements, and guidelines that maximize our look at benefits. This is net public benefits. It doesn't specifically address national security, but we're moving in this direction to recognize that we can't, purely just look at NED benefit costs in assessing the value of these projects. So we want to continue. I think there's appetite for that from all quarters of people invested in the Corps projects, and we will continue to work in the way that you suggested here.
Well, let's keep, again, we got to have open lines of communication here, and we can't have everybody holding their breath, waiting for the next funding cycle, hoping that that we're going to get enough for that next phase. So I'd really like to keep close on this project as well as some of the others we're working on. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. That will end our hearing today, and I want to thank our witnesses and all of my colleagues for participating in today's hearing. I look forward to working together on this year's appropriations bill to make sure we are providing the Army Corps and the Bureau the resources they need. I will keep the hearing record open for 1 week. Committee members who would like to submit written questions for the record should do so by 5:00 p.m. Wednesday, May 22nd. We appreciate the Army Corps and Bureau responding to them in a reasonable amount of time. Thank you very much to our witnesses today. We stand adjourned.